Hi, it's Wednesday, and that means it's time for another video edition of Widower Wednesday. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower, and today we are going to discuss family dynamics and whether or not these family dynamics are widower related or just part of family tradition things that maybe you need to get used to. The idea for this for this video comes from an email that I received, and I'm sharing this email with permission. But the email goes like this. It says, "My widower is Italian. Is it normal for his daughters to come over to his house every day during the week and call several times a day?" So the real question this person is asking is, are these family dynamics of his daughters coming over to his house every day and or calling several times a day and coming over to his house several times a week? Is this a widower-related issue or is this a family dynamic issue? And it is something that I see a lot in emails and in coaching sessions where every family's different. Every family has their own traditions, and sometimes when you get into a relationship with a widower, though, sometimes I think it's easy to think that every issue is a widower issue, or it's like, well, are they doing this because he's a widower and things have changed since his late wife died, or is this just the way things have always been and I got to decide if I live with it? That's the real question being asked here. So first of all, my answer is I'm not familiar with Italian culture. If someone is, by the way, so I can't say if this behavior of his daughters is normal or not, if this is part of the Italian culture or not. If someone is familiar with it, please leave some comments below. I would actually be curious to know if this is a cultural thing or not. But what I can say is that when you marry somebody or when you get into a relationship with someone, you kind of become part of that family, right? And each family has their different traditions and good and bad habits. So again, going back to this thing of his daughters coming over several times a week and calling all the time, I don't, really the thing is this the way it was before his late wife died, or is this something that's happened since his late wife died? I've seen lots of situations where things change after the late wife died for the worse, and I've seen things that things are going on in the family, and when you really get down into it and you start asking questions, it's like, well, it's always been this way. This is just kind of a family tradition thing. So, for example, something I do see quite common, and this is especially with maybe teenagers or younger kids, is that the late wife dies, and then because they've lost their mom, it's very common for the widower to spoil his kids, for example, or not expect much of them, or they just kind of it's like, oh, you've lost your mom, so you don't have to worry about getting a job, assuming like they're a teenager or old enough to get a job. Yeah, you're failing school, but you lost your mom. It's okay. Whatever you can. I'm just going to give you money. I'm going to spoil you because you lost your mom and life's hard, right? Okay, that's an example of something that happens because they lost their mom, right? And that's a bad thing. And I'm going to say it, but it is kind of a bad tradition that kind of seeps in. You feel bad for the kids. The widower feels bad for his kids and trying to make life easier for them. And, again, I think he's doing it. I think it's done most of the time with good intentions. But as a result, he starts dating again. This woman comes into his life, and there's just, whatever. There's kids who aren't working, who are freeloading, who maybe treat their dad rude or are flunking out of school, and the dad doesn't seem to care. Okay. That's a bad family tradition dynamic thing. And again, that could be changed, though, right? The widower can again, it's up to the widower, but he can kind of turn things around and tell his kids that he expects more of them, things like that. Maybe a good one would be, is where the widower, is where the mom dies, and he's still being a dad to his kids, but he's still expecting things of them, right? Things haven't changed. He's still expecting them to whatever, to get jobs, support themselves, whatever the family dynamic is. So, like in this case of the Italian family here, really the question you need to ask is this something his daughters have done all the time? Is this something that they started to do before their mom died, right? Is this just part of their family dynamic, or is it something that has started since mom died? Because if it's part of their family dynamic, if this is like a bigger thing that's been going on for years, and I don't know, for forever, I'm going to say good luck changing it. At that point, you've got to decide, is this something that I can live with? If I move in with this guy, marry this guy, become close to this guy, can I deal with the fact that his daughters might come over several times a week and they're going to call him all the time? And now, I'm not saying that the widower can't set some boundaries and maybe change things a little bit, but I am pointing out, if this is kind of a family, if this is a cultural thing or a family tradition thing, it's different than if you have to approach it differently than if this is something that happened since mom died, right? Mom died. Well, I feel like I need to check in on dad all the time, so I'm going to call him. I'm going to go over there several times a week, things like that. Very different dynamics there. Because one is, if you go in there and start attacking a family tradition or something like that, how do you think the family's going to react? I mean, we all have family traditions. I know, there's family traditions that me and Julie have, and like if Julie was to die and I was dating somebody else and they came in there and just kind of attacked these traditions, I'd be putting up walls and saying, lady, what the heck are you doing? Not that traditions can't change and there can't be things put in there, but not understanding why we're doing certain things. Now, if it was, again, me spoiling my kids and me not being a good father because Julie died, then, and someone coming in and saying, dude, Abel, this isn't right. Okay, very different dynamic. Yeah, understand what understand the bigger picture here, because if it's a family tradition thing and this is just the way the family is, you've just got to decide, can I live with this? And then again, maybe they scale it back a bit, but asking that his daughters just simply not come over and things like that, if this is like a family thing, again, I think you can scale it back. I think you're maybe walking a bit too far if you say that they just you can't come over or something like that, right? That's not working. But if it is more of, hey, this is something that's been happening since since their mom died, since my late wife died, then I think the widower can go in there and say, yeah, I appreciate all of the support and help you've given me over this time. Thank you, it was very helpful. And then you can go in and talk to them and say, I no longer need this help anymore. You're still welcome to come over, you're still welcome to call, but we just can't maybe do it as often, things like that. I appreciate your support. So again, it's just kind of understanding that dynamic. Is this a family thing, or is it a tradition that's happened since the late wife died? And you just got to approach them differently. And again, you have to remember, when you marry into a family or when you become involved in a family, there's just stuff you've got to decide, can I live with this? And if you can decide it earlier than not, then that's great. And there's not a right or wrong answer if you can't live with it. For example, say this, this example that I've been given, it is a family tradition, and even if they scale it back somewhat, you're going to have a hard time with it, then my advice is to get out of the relationship. Again, I think there's reasonable things that you can ask to change. And again, not that this family dynamic can't slowly change, but it's very different than if it's something that's happened since the late wife died and something that's just been going on for years and years and years. Again, no family's perfect. Every family has its quirks. What you need to decide is, can you live with it? And I'll be very honest. Krista's family was very dysfunctional, and I didn't quite, before I married Krista, my dad had always told me that, you marry into the family and kind of the issues that are in the family. And me being young, not quite understanding that until I actually got married and got into Krista's family, then I kind of like, oh yeah, there's some dysfunctional things here. And I'll be honest, those dysfunctional issues, they were part of our marriage, and I didn't want them to be, but I was slowly working on them. But at some point I just kind of had to, to realize I can work on these, but this is kind of what I married into. And I knew about them coming into it. I just thought that Krista would be able to change things once we got married. It's a little bit of ignorance on my part and being young and kind of dumb. But so yeah, just decide, is this something I can live with? And if you can't, there's nothing wrong with that, but be honest with yourself whether or not you can live with it. And I'll be honest, when I was dating Julie, because I was so kind of jaded, I guess, from my experience with Krista's extended family. If her family was crazy, and I'll be very honest about this, but if her family had any, big, crazy issues, I was going to back out of the relationship because I didn't want to deal with it. Now, Julie didn't know that at the time when I was meeting her family and spending time with them. I didn't tell Julie, but in the back of my head, I was thinking, like, if this family is crazy or there's issues that I don't want to deal with, I'm not going to deal with them again. And I was willing to walk over that. As much as that would suck, I would have walked over it. Thankfully, Julie's family is more or less, I guess, normal, and I'm going to use that term loosely, but, there's yes, they have drama, and, there's issues like any other family, but they're issues that I can live with and deal with. It's not a lot of the dysfunctional drama that I had to deal with Krista's family. And I don't say that to knock Krista's family. I'm just pointing out that Krista's family and Julie's family are very different. And if I could go back in time and deal with Krista's family again, I wouldn't change my position on things, but I would change the way that I dealt with those situations, because oftentimes I did not deal with them very good, and I'll be completely honest with that. I handled them very badly. But again, I don't regret necessarily the stands I took, but I do regret the way that I handled those issues. So again, it's a personal preference thing. If you want to live in a big, happy Italian family, again, assuming that this is normal for the daughters to come over and stuff, go ahead and do it. But if you can't, at least be honest with yourself about that you can't do it and bow out gracefully, right? Families are awesome and wonderful, but they're all kind of crazy in their own way. They're all kind of just different in their own way, and so it's just something you got to think about when when you become serious with someone. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower. And please leave your comments below. By the way, if you have comments, like this video, subscribe to the channel, schedule a coaching session if you want to discuss in more detail. I'm happy to always talk about it with you. And I will see you next Wednesday.